All right. I don't know if you guys, how many people are fans of urban music, hip hop, R&B? Yeah, all right. Well, something very exciting. There's a new station, new music urban channel called Mix, M-Y-X. And a gentleman from Mix is here. Go and raise your hand right there.
Right.
And yeah, this just launched in February, and it could be seen on Direct TV and pretty soon on Comcast. Okay. So if you guys have any questions about the Mix channel, go ahead and reach out to Kareem right there, okay? All right. And let the games begin.
How's everyone doing? Okay, so I'm going to start this off with a quick story. When I was just finishing high school and just entered college, this is 1993, 1994, I was in New York. There was these commercials that came out promoting Nike for basketball, their New York City sort of street ball campaign. And the commercials were basically a still shot of a graffiti-ridden wall. Hidden in there was like a very small Nike logo, and all it was this still shot. And they had basketball players, one of them being Bobito, doing a voiceover and just basically trash talking for 30 seconds. And I was like, this is amazing. That was tied in with a print ad campaign that was going around the city. And they would take over subway trains. So, you know, they would take an entire subway train, and every ad on that subway would be this NYC basketball print campaign. And they were, in my mind back then, so incredible and so fresh and so dope that I actually stole them. I'd actually take the train at 4 a.m. just to be in a train by myself so no one would see me, and I would steal these ads and hang them up in my apartment. At this time, I was a product design major, actually at Parsons, and inadvertently, my guidance counselor came over to my apartment one day. The minute she walked in and she saw all these stolen subway ads and billboards hanging in my apartment, she said, "What are you doing in product design? You need to be in graphic design and communication design." And hence, that's what changed the course of my life, possibly. The man who was behind all those ads was this man sitting next to me. His name is John Jay, as many of you know now. So I wanted to say thank you first for changing the course of my life.
Thanks for making me feel so damn old, too.
I will quickly, in case you weren't here earlier today, I'm just going to do the formal introduction to John Jay. He's the executive creative director and partner of Wyden and Kennedy, currently living in Portland, Oregon. Jay oversees with Dan Wyden the global creative work for Wyden and Kennedy offices in Portland, New York, London, Amsterdam, Tokyo, and Shanghai, and soon Dubai, right?
Beijing and Delhi.
Okay, Delhi, right. He opened the Wyden and Kennedy offices in Tokyo, and where he lived for 6 years, and Shanghai, and works in those offices every single month. He is also the founder and co-creative director for Wyden and Kennedy Culture Lab, the independent music label, and he recently opened Studio J in Portland's Chinatown, his own creative design studio. So that's John, and I have you in the hot seat now. So just to start off, just to give, let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
Columbus, Ohio.
Okay. High Asian population.
Yes. There was a Chinatown. It was one building. As a kid, it was one building. So.
And what was it like growing up there?
Well, back then, the whole game in America was about assimilation. So you kind of disavowed that. I grew up never admitting I spoke Chinese because I didn't want to be made fun of. I didn't want kids asking me, "How do you say this?" and "How do you press?" And so forget it. I don't speak.
Do you know Taekwondo?
Yeah, that too. My favorite story, I told Christina this, I was in elementary school and the kid came up to me and said, "You're different. You're really different. You don't look like us. Do you speak German?" Holy smokes, what am I living?
So definitely, it was beyond being a minority in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh yeah, we went through the classic stuff. Parents couldn't get a home or turned down for a lease for an apartment and so forth. So the classic, immigrant story.
Right. Yeah. And a time before when we sat and talked, you were telling me about sort of the laundry story. Can you tell me that?
Well, it's almost a cliche. You almost think I'm making it up, but I'm watching the Cleavers on TV and looking at romanticized American life and Father Knows Best, and families taking vacations and things. We had none of that, and I grew up in a Chinese laundry, in the back of a laundry with no living room, no dining room, nothing, just in one room in the back of a laundry.
Right. And then how was that for your social life?
First of all, I mean, it's kind of serious, but it's funny too. I would never invite anyone over because I was too ashamed, because everyone else had a house and they'd come over and have dinner and the family would be sitting around a dinner table and we didn't even have a dinner table. But the great one thing was in the 8th grade, there was a dance and I needed some cool clothes and I didn't have any cool clothes, so I just went through the laundry. Picked out a nice little cardigan, slipped it on, put it back in the plastic bag, and I'm in like Flint. So.
It's funny because that happened to you living in a laundry, but I'll tell you, I mean, I grew up, basically in a regular house too, but I felt the same exact thing. Like I didn't want to invite friends over because I didn't want to explain the smells that they were smelling, languages that they were hearing, why this old woman is yelling at me even though she's not mad at me, like she's not mad at me, that's just the way she talks, like, and it was just like it was easier just to like
let it slide.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What about your parents? What were they doing?
Well, as I said, they came from China and they bought a laundry and we worked in the laundry forever, and then about in the 11th grade they wanted me to go to a better high school, so they bought a grocery store. So I ended up becoming the world's fastest cashier when I was 16. I was amazing on I always rung up the groceries so fast, and I'd already see the $20 bill in their hand, so I'd already subtracted it and had the change in my hand. Right. While they're still pulling out the 20, I had the change in my hand already. So that was my little professional gig as a cashier. Was design or creativity anywhere in your early life at this point? Like, were you a doodler, like a drawer or anything? Kind of, but classic Confucian, background. I was told that never go into arts, never go into creative business. You would end up starving, and you would have friends who come to the house, Chinese friends who would come and say, don't go into the arts and so forth and so on. So it's quite ironic what I do now. Yeah. So it was typical Asian. Yeah. And I was told that I would starve. So. Right. It was the same with me. I was either a doctor or lawyer. Yeah. And if you were a failure, you could be an accountant. If you're a loser, fine. You could go into accounting. Yeah. And then you have kids now. Yeah. Two? Yeah, filmmaking. One's going to film school. Right. And how about the other one? Skateboarder. So you can't be the Asian parent now. You're a hypocrite if you are. Well, those guys know you, and they know Futura, and they know Stash, and they know. So we've crossed the line long ago. And then you have brothers? Yeah, 2 brothers. One is an athletic director at Ohio State University, and one is in finance. Okay, so you're really the black sheep. Yeah, I am the black sheep. Yeah, interesting. Proudly so. I gotta ask. Jay is not a Chinese last name. Was TSE pronounced? And it's spelled Jay because of I think the attorneys that were handling the papers. Mm-hmm. Typically, what happened is the attorneys couldn't figure it out. They would spell it however they wanted to spell it, and that becomes your legal name. So. Oh, okay. And then, you said back to high school. You went to sort of like a special high school they put you in. No, I didn't ride the short bus or anything. No, it was, I went to a regular high school. A public high school. And yeah. What were you like in high school? Were you the popular kid, the geek? I was on the fringe of the popular crowd. Oh, okay. I wasn't the geek. I wasn't smart enough to be the geek, so you were average academically? Yeah. It slid. Once I discovered beer and girls, it just went like that. What were you into? Just music, sports, everything. Everything. I tried so hard to be American, right? Classic American. Yeah. So, just that thing of assimilation. Yeah, of course. Right. And that was remember, I was coming on the tail of the model minority. We were the model minority of America. So. Right. And no more. Where'd you go to college? Well, I went to Ohio State. It was very, I didn't even think about, nor did we have the means for me to go to a big school somewhere else, but this was a big school right down the street. So I kind of grew up in the shadows of the university. Right. So it's ironic that my brother's working there now. Yeah. And then, did you sort of have any mark at Ohio State, or were you just
flying like
Was it-
student?
Well, one day, my big thing was every September, as I'm thinking of the schedule, I would always have to make sure the schedule was a little lighter come winter because I was worried about spring break, where I was going to go for spring break. That was my academic kind of plan. Daytona Beach, it would be Fort Lauderdale, and so these are big decisions, we have to make, And then I discovered this thing called design, visual communications, and
It was a class.
it was a class, and it was a 4-year program. So that's how I discovered. And I walked in, I came from nothing. So I walked into the library and I saw all these European magazines, and I suddenly discovered there's this thing called design that takes you around the world, and it has something to do with culture and meeting with other people and making things for other people. And that really shook me up and opened up my world.
That was your major?
In communications design, in visual communications, which
Okay.
was graphic design.
Right. But it's interesting because up until this point, you're an everyday American, normal kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like no artistic prodigy or anything like that.
No. My mother always said she doesn't know where the hell all this comes from,
Right.
So, nor was there any aspiration in the family,
Yeah.
to be artistic or anything.
I find it funny, like when I took communication design as well, and when I art directed my first magazine, I gave it to my mom and I was like, look, I art directed this whole thing. And she's like, did you write all the articles? I was like, no. She's like, did you shoot it? I was like, no. Did you print the pages? No. Then you did nothing. It's like, you can't win.
Well, I am actually going back to Columbus in about 3 weeks or 4 weeks to speak at a little school where I did take art lessons on Saturday morning in 6th, 7th grade. And I'm excited because my mom will be there in the audience, in this big audience, and I'll be able to put some stuff on the wall and a little bit of what you saw today, and show her that her son is gainfully employed somewhere, and that he hasn't starved yet.
Right. You're sort of one of your legendary attributes is your work ethic. And in the industry of sort of design and advertising, there is a myth that there's actually clones of John Jay. He's actually just a clone. The actual John Jay is
You couldn't make it today.
This is actually a robotic clone. But it's crazy because I have friends that work for Wide, and they'll be like, they're looking at a website and they see that, he's speaking at a conference in San Francisco, and then the next thing you know, he's standing, telling them to change some color or something. It's like, how are you in both places at the same time, So the work ethic is definitely a big reputation. Did you work a lot in school? Or?
Well, it's interesting. I used to watch my parents work until the wee hours in the morning,
Right.
And I would say, God damn, I'm not going to do this. That is one lesson I learned. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to work as hard as they're working. It's just not worth it. And it is.
You are.
Ironically.
During school, did you work? College?
No, man, that was like, yeah, I worked. Like when the final project was due, and I'd watch the clock, and it was 60 hours to go.
Yeah.
Then I'd put it in gear, put it in
Okay.
4th gear, and go and work with no sleep for 4 or 5 days, and then.
But you didn't have a job outside of that?
No. Well, I'm sorry, I did. I worked for my parents' store all the time, almost full time. So.
Oh, wow.
So.
Okay. So you said when you started taking those classes and you saw those magazines, who was sort of an early influence to make you say, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life?
Well, there's several. First was the film Blow Up, the Antonio film. It was about a person who I became friends with later, David Bailey, the famous fashion photographer from London. And I watched the film, and Verushka was dancing, laying on top of him while he's shooting pictures, with the lens, like, oh my God, there's a job like this, Holy smokes, what job is that? I want to find out about that,
Yeah.
And then the second time I don't know where I was, I found a magazine called British Vogue, and I didn't know there was such a thing as a British Vogue. And I kept looking, and I looked, and this is when I'm already working, actually, in New York. I saw, I would always look at the masthead to see who was doing what, and who's the editor, who's the art director. And I saw this name, Barney Wan, W-A-N. I go, so there's a Chinese fellow somewhere in the world who has a title called art director. What?
British Vogue.
British Vogue. What is that? So I was lucky in my career. I just went on a search to meet these people. So I met up with Barney in London and hung out with him, became friends over a summer and so forth. And And all these kind of accidents started happening. You know, I told you last night, I was in a lab one time looking at these amazing Revlon ads, and I asked them, how does someone make an ad look? I had no idea how you would make an ad like that, you know?
Right.
And they said, oh, that's Jimmy Moore. And then years later, I walked into a studio and I said, I'm John Jay, and he looked at me and said, but you're Chinese. And he says, I'm Jimmy Moore, and I said, but you're Chinese. What the hell's going on here? You know?
We're supposed to be white.
Yeah, dude.
Right. When was the first time you were paid to create or design something?
Oh God, I think first, I didn't do any freelancing, and I wasn't as enterprising, breaking into the lab and making T-shirts and making an empire like you know. First day at work, you know, I moved to New York immediately. As soon as I graduated, I went to New York immediately,
Right.
and started working in the magazine business.
Okay, and that was the publishing world that you
Yeah,
entered
so
first.
I stuck around in the publishing world, working at small magazines and trying to work my way up, you know, in the magazine world.
Right, and then you ended up at Bloomingdale's.
Yeah, so I've always had this luck of being able to cross over. So I was a group art director of some business, medical, and science magazines. And then I made this jump over to fashion marketing, the fashion retail business.
Was that like a chance meeting? How did that jump occur?
What happened was the son of the chairman was an intern. He's a famous writer now in New York. And he introduced me to one of the people at the store. And they said, oh, he sounds interesting. The chairman, maybe we could make an appointment with him. And then, so I went in to see him. And what happened is I knew this would be maybe my first and last chance to ever get into the inner sanctums of a fashion business and so
Right.
forth. So rather than walk in with a resume, I cranked over the weekend, 5 straight days, and created a portfolio specifically for this interview. Because if I showed my portfolio, I have medical magazines,
Right.
business magazines, it would be nothing relevant to what
So
this
you
meant.
created work.
I created work specifically for that interview.
Right.
Worked with photographers over the weekend and shot this and created a whole book and just said, look, this is my only chance to ever even get an opinion, a professional in the fashion business. Here's some ideas I have, and that's what I showed.
Right. And you spent 13 years there?
I was a creative director there for 9 years and 10 years, and then I did what I promised the CEO I would not do. I took my boss's job as the marketing director. So I left the creative side and went into the marketing director's job.
Oh, okay. How did you like 13 years in New York?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, it was being in that business, we don't have enough time today perhaps to go into detail, but it was like postgraduate education. I traveled the world, worked with the best photographers in the world, with the best models in the world, worked with different countries, constantly on the road, working, shooting somewhere in the world. And I think that what was interesting is that despite the fact that I was in fashion business doing ads for the store, what I learned a great deal that set me up for Nike, my next step, or at White & Kennedy, was the concept of authenticity.
Right.
And at Nike, they always talk about authenticity, cultural authenticity. And that I learned not through sports marketing, but through working with all these different countries and we would do China promotion, Japan promotion, French promotion. And they always had doubts that any Americans could ever properly, authentically portray their culture.
Right.
And so authenticity was drilled into us.
Do you miss New York now?
Sometimes I come try to see you, but you're never there, and but there are other things now in my life. Having lived in Tokyo, I mean, that completely changed my life. So.
So then you ended up from Bloomingdale's to Wine & Kennedy.
Right.
And how did that transition happen? Again, another sort of out of market transition.
Yeah. So I've been lucky about that. I've been friends with Dan White, and I judged a San Francisco art director show. And he was sitting there, so we introduced each other. And then over the years, I'm very good at keeping up with correspondence. Even postcards back then, before internet, I'm very good at staying connected and sending things and of interest. And so over the years, we kept in touch. And then literally, it was that thing that I showed up on the screen today, the 1992 Newsweek cover, where a White & Kennedy employee was listed as one of the 100 most influential people in American culture, that it clicked, like, oh, this is not just another ad agency. Right. This place does something more than that. And then I said, well, maybe it's time to reevaluate my love of New York, and maybe I can open up my horizons a little bit.
Right. So you asked them, or they asked
No,
you?
they asked me, Dan had been asking me several times over the years,
Uh-huh.
and it was finally that moment where it just clicked that it's time to say yes. So
Okay. So then you ended up in Portland?
I ended up in Portland, and the mythology is true, I never visited Portland. So I went from New York City to Portland without ever visiting, without interviewing, without going to the office to check it out, because I knew as a snotty New Yorker, I would say, well, there's no museum there, there's no theater there, there's no restaurants there, which I already knew.
Right. And what's amazing to me is that anecdote that I told you in the beginning about the NYC basketball campaign.
Mm-hmm.
You did that. That was the first thing you
The
did.
first week.
The first week, you created that thing.
Yeah. What happened was Phil Knight called, his son was a rapper in New York at that time, and his son called Dad, and he said, Dad, the Nike brand is losing relevance on the streets of New York. And then he called, so Phil Knight called Dan Wyden, said, what should we do about this? Do you put some people on this project and think about it? And he said, well, my friend John just arrived from New York this week. It was on Tuesday, I arrived on Monday or something like Thursday.
He said, go back to New York.
Yeah, go back to New York and figure this out, you know? So that was the first thing I did, and what I utilized was really my connections, you know, in New York to really deep dive into people's lives, and so Babito, the infamous, you know.
Do you want to show some of that? I think we
Yeah,
have
so why don't I show, I don't have Babito's voice, but on the TV, why don't we roll spot 1, 2, and 3, and I won't interrupt them, just roll them.
Could somebody bring the water? You want beer, Papa?
That was amazing.
To put it in context, like you're watching that on a big screen, but imagine you're watching NBC prime time, whatever crap, Cheers, you know, then that commercial comes on, like your jaw is on the floor.
Well, you know, it's interesting. This was the beginning of what we call NYC, the campaign, and it was to celebrate the New York City basketball player, the inner city ball player,
Right.
not the rich guy in the NBA, not the famous, but give props to the people who keeps the game alive. And we wanted to show this brand is down on the ground level that respects you. It's
And
all about
this is
respect.
1993, this is before And One,
Yeah.
this is before Mountain Dew mixtapes, this is a long time ago.
Yeah, so thank you for reminding me of that. Can we switch to stills and show?
Yeah, some of the print work.
Yeah, it's like the
That I
first.
stole.
Yeah, and I'll show you some of the stuff that Jeff stole from us.
Yeah.
And we were very proud of that moment too, because I saw a thing in the newspaper, in the Daily News, it said that the Nike posters were the most stolen posters, communications out of subways, and I quickly ripped that out and sent it to the client and said, you know, I want a raise. So this is how it all started. When I went into the neighborhoods nearby the basketball courts and put up these swooshes with the NYC on it, and throughout the city, and then I let them sit for about a month. Then I went back into the city and actually photographed them and made them into ads and billboards. So I let it sit in the environment, I come back, photograph it, and now I take it to the next thing and make it into billboards
So
throughout the
let it
city.
become the environment, let it decay, let it get covered up.
Right, let's go to the second one.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then, at that time, in the beginning, no one knew that this was about basketball. And this was the first time that you saw anything like NYC, anything above the swoosh. So they thought maybe this was, you know, celebrating the city, of course, but they didn't know yet what this was really about. And it wasn't until the second phase hit, next slide, that you began seeing these using the vernaculars of the street. And there's these are just one of many. We did this for about a year, so there's a lot of ads that really celebrate.
How many variations were there in total of this?
So the campaign ran for almost 3.5 years. It was killed at the end. The final, there's a whole, I should have brought that. The last part never ran. It was called East versus West. It was the time of East Coast, West Coast.
Hip-hop, yeah.
And after Tupac and Biggie got shot, I had to pull the campaign because our goal was to say, let's not use violence to settle differences and show who's best, let's use sports. Let's deal with it on the court. But, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and even though that may have been our intentions, the public would have thought we were trying to exploit the deaths of these two great rappers, so we had to kill them. And so that ended it. But now there's remnants of this that keep going on, throughout Nike's life. So go to the next one. Then we started celebrating the actual courts themselves in Brooklyn and so forth.
These were really hard to steal. You had to cut all of them. It was really hard.
And go to the next one. This was actually part of that phase 2, actually. Like Baskin Robbins, 31 scoops. So you notice this is a quote from Earl the Goat Manigault. This is arguably one of the greatest basketball players of all time.
Yeah.
And so played in the early 80s, late 70s. And so what we were trying to do is help the kids from the neighborhoods really understand these great players who came before them. And these are players that never made it to the NBA.
But to have the GOAT, which is one of the most legendary players, not show his face, not show a basketball shoe, not show a Nike swoosh on product, it doesn't happen like that anymore. This is really balls out stuff.
Yeah, and it's if there was a brief, it's about, on the campaign, it's respect. It's about pay respect to the people who made this great. So then we kept pushing this more and more. So go to the next one. So I found this former graffiti artist who really learned how to do Photoshop and Illustrator and everything, and his name was Javier Mikowski.
Yes.
And we created these figures, and then we did a whole 90-second animated spot about East versus West that ran only in the theaters.
Mm. Okay, so at this point you're in Portland. How long did you spend in Portland?
I stayed there 5 years before I went to Japan.
Okay, so what was the mission? What did Dan say, what did you have to go do there? Open Wieden Kennedy Japan, or was it existing already?
No, start something that would be kind of like the laboratory, the experiment. And I think the real story was I was interviewing creative directors to see who would be a good candidate to go open this office. Who did I think would be a good person to really be the first plant of our DNA in Japan to open the office? And after the second interview, I punched Dan's number on the phone, called him up, I said, "Great, I found him." He goes, "Really? That was quick. Who was it?" I said, "Me." So
because you love Tokyo?
Yeah, no, I'm sitting there doing the sell job, like how incredible this is going to be, and it's Tokyo, and it's unbelievable, and what an opportunity. And I'm listening to myself talk, and I go, "Well, wait a minute, what am I sitting here for?" So I went.
Right. So I guess you weren't sad to leave Portland at this time.
No, but it's a great city, but Tokyo was just amazing. I think what was great is that this was about the 6th or 7th year of the recession, of the Great Recession, in Japan, and most companies would never dare to open an new office in the middle of a recession. But we knew that during the recession, society will change. It will come economic change, will force social change, cultural change. So we wanted to be in the thick of things as things were beginning to change.
Right. And then you kind of got called again for Shanghai.
Yeah, but I didn't move there. I
Right.
planned strategically the move to Shanghai. Once again, I tell people when you're in Shanghai, that stuff that's passing by your window, that's not traffic, that's history. You're sitting in the middle of history being made. So we had to open an office. I opened it with no clients there in Shanghai.
Right.
This is history. We got to be there. I don't care. Put us there. We'll find the clients. If we're smart, we'll be able to get the clients.
Right. And is that sort of the same feeling you have about India?
Well, India's we have a love affair for India. We've always wanted to be in India. India and Cuba. Those are the two places we'd like to be. And we try to, we probably couldn't be as daring to open without a client. And something magical happened. We just won the Nokia global account. And Nokia has 70% market share in India.
Right.
So here we go.
Yeah. So as you looked at so you're definitely well versed in American culture. You grew up there. Then Japanese culture, Chinese culture, Indian culture. Can you see where the commonalities and the great divides are in those?
Well, I think you and all of your friends represent the commonality. There's something about youth culture around the world that it doesn't matter whether you speak English or not, but because of the internet, because of blogs, there is a commonality there that is just, it's unbelievable. I mean, I know at that party that I showed in Beijing at the opening, there were Chinese kids who were lined there at the front door waiting for you.
Yeah.
So they've never been to America before.
I know.
That's the thing that most corporate people don't get, how closely connected this whole society is. And I know last night we were talking about, damn it, is there another name for this group of people, or maybe we don't want to define this group?
Right. At that Beijing party that you showed, this kid came up to me with a shopping bag and sneakers, and he had spent $1,500 US on the sneakers. They were the pigeons on stage show, and he wanted me to sign them. And it was just crazy to be in Beijing, 5,000 miles away from my home, to have this Chinese kid I don't know come up to me and want me. He spent, who knows, 2-3 months of his pay on that. Yeah, probably more than that on his shoes. And he wanted me to write on them. And I was like, are you sure you don't want me to write on the box? This is crazy, But what you say is just, the network is this close now. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And then you opened Studio J now recently. And what do you do there?
Maybe I have to flip to, I have a picture of it. How about picture number 19? Not that it's a great picture, but I don't know. I'm always constantly looking for more things to do, so I'm my own worst enemy.
Right.
This is in Chinatown, and I'm hoping my presence will help to rejuvenate not just myself, but I'm trying to bring energy to the Chinatown, what used to be Japantown and Chinatown. It's dying quickly in Portland. The old immigrant families don't really know what to do. So I'm trying to bring some energy into the area, and rather than replicate a historic Chinatown, let's make a Chinatown of the future, something with modern people. Like if you were to have a restaurant or a cafe, what would that be? That represents the new Chinatown.
What does the studio itself do?
Anything that's interesting that isn't in conflict with our clients, and whatever I have time for. The first project, I'm very much into architecture, and so we have Brad Clofield, who is the architect, controversial building at 59th Street, the new design museum at Columbus Circle. He is the architect for this house. And so house will be finished in December and is for sale, and I think we may even have it sold already.
So it's of no conflict to widen?
No, that's so I want to really inch into doing interesting architectural development.
Right, okay. John, what does the word Nike mean to you?
On a good day, it's the best client in the world, bar none. It's unbelievable. The social pressure, the cultural pressure inside that company for any new executive or any new marketing person, the weight of great work that Wellington and Nike has done forces them to come to the table and want good creative work, smart creative work. They can't slack off. There's too much pressure history. So they have to ask for good work,
right,
or they're out of there.
Well, it has to be, in my mind, beyond good. I mean,
yeah.
to create, communicate messages for a brand is something that needs a lot of talent, a lot of skill. To do something extremely well is something magical, but to do something like to turn a brand into a religion, which is what Nike basically is completely a different story. So that level of expertise is amazing, I think.
So I would say on a good day, on any day, they are, actually I should say even on a bad day, they still remain, in my opinion, the best client in the world, globally.
Right. I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a moment. And some of the stuff you showed earlier, the commercials and things like that, where you're using artists and everything. Some say you're raping the artist by using them to sell products for $1 billion corporation. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think this is where your record over the long term has to be examined. I think it's really, really important that you treat people with respect and as partners. So that 2-minute piece I showed earlier, the Presto thing that was, with the 5 partners, and David Ellis was the creative leader on that one. You can ask David, you can ask every one of those people that have collaborated with us whether or not they got something out of the experience, whether they gained something artistically from it. Forget about the money part of it, because a lot of the times what we bring to them is not just simply money. So I think we really try to work in good partnership, and certainly I don't put a gun to, no one works with us because they were forced to work with us.
Right.
Everyone, there's a willing partnership that comes into that. So, but I'm very conscious about the artistic community, and the Music Lab is an example of that, of how constantly trying to find ways to contribute back to the community.
Right. Where do you get the most purest joy out of your job?
I think the people, I mean, look where I'm sitting, I get to come and sit here and talk to you and meet a lot of people that I admired, you know, and blogs who I haven't. I think for me, it's always been about the people. I think earlier I showed the picture of photographs of our employees. I mean, White and Kennedy is just a rich place of interesting people around the world. And the day that I took Dan White into the China office, he was almost a bit teary-eyed. I walked him into the garden and we looked at the new renovated house that we have, and all these Chinese people poured out to greet him.
Yeah.
They're all wearing his name. They're all wearing his DNA now.
Right.
You know, so that, you know, my job, I no longer work on creative work hands-on so much. And it's partly why I have Studio J, so I can do some of that. So when people ask me what do I do, other than just simply saying I'm management, really what I'm doing is creative directing organisms, creative directing people to create this incredible organism so that the brand can stay, our brand can stay alive.
Right. How many years have you been at White & Now in total?
94, end of 93, 94, so.
Okay. As you look back, what was the high point?
Gosh.
There's so many, but...
Yeah, there's so many. To be honest, the New York thing.
Really?
Was
the first job?
The very first job. It's hard, you know. I remember Phil Knight said to me, we presented round 2 to him, and he was, oh, this is good, and I kept showing him more stuff, and finally he was like, he was a little tired of my enthusiasm. He's like, okay, it's enough, you know. And he said, John, anything else? And I said, yes. NYC shoes, please. And he looked at his assistant, and she said, I already wrote it down.
Right.
Next thing you know, I've got my first NYC
So that's where
shoes.
that's a case where like the marketing drove the product rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we didn't design the shoes.
Right, but it wouldn't
Yeah.
happen without
Right.
that.
So when you see NYC on Nike shoes around the world, like in Tokyo,
Yeah.
that came from that conversation that I had. So.
Right. And what was the lowest point?
Wow. Lowest point. The lowest point was a few years ago when we lost a piece of the business to a competitor for reasons I thought were not valid.
Right.
But the great thing about that is that we won it back.
Okay.
You know, and recently we lost it's no secret in the trades, and we lost running, and that's okay.
It's competition, right?
Yeah, it's good.
I find that, you know, really successful people that I meet, they all have one thing in common, and that's an utterly amazing and remarkable failure at some point. And I think that the ability to be able to bounce back from that failure is the mark of greatness. Do you have one sort of remarkable failure that you can?
Yes, school. I was so adamant not to be stereotypical Chinese. I took it too far. I took it too far. I was so make sure I wasn't the math geek, you know, and so I allowed that to go too far, and I probably could have gotten more out of school, out of college in particular.
Also, I think one of your great strengths is being able to see talent and creativity where others don't. So kind of like those commercials where you just had the voiceovers of basketball players, like being able to just say like, that's enough, you know, don't need any more. That is a talent. Where did that come from? Where does that vision come from where you can see David Ellis, see Bobito, see him and be like, this is the person we have to talk to?
Well, I don't know. It may have come from during all my years of traveling around the world when I was at Bloomingdale's, because I was constantly interfacing with different cultures, French, Italians, Germans, you know, all constantly. So I think that teaches you to be very, even if you don't speak the language, to be totally intuitive. My assistants if you look at the course of my tenure at White & Kennedy, they have an amazing track record of one's a director, one's a creative director at MTV Japan, one is this and this and this. So they didn't. I was going to make her stand up as she could.
What is your fixation with the artist?
You know what it is, to be honest, to prove that we deserve to be working with them, quite honestly. To prove that we're worthy.
To prove that White & is worthy.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds so, like, why would White & Kennedy, this global independent ad agency, worry about that?
Right.
It's because it's not it's not client to agency or agency to contractor or vendor. It's one-on-one. You know, the great joy is this one-on-one relationship. And I want to give them good assignments. I don't want them to do crap work, you know, so I want to bring the highest level of assignments for those people. And I just want to, maybe it's a bit of insecurity that you're revealing, but I just want to prove that I deserve to be in the circle.
Right, I know what you mean. I actually hate this question. It's asked of me all the time, but I think it's kind of relevant here.
Oh, sure, then ask me.
Yeah. What advice would you give someone in this room who wants to be where you're at?
God, it's a boring answer.
What's that?
Work your ass off. Just work your ass. It is like a little, you know, when your parents teach you how to save and you put $1 and you think, what's the consequences of putting $1 in the bank? It's meaningless. But just $1 at a time. So working hard,
Just chip away, right?
just keep chipping, just work harder and harder and harder, and the rewards get bigger and bigger and bigger, and seize the opportunity. I think a lot of people work hard, and with hard work, luck comes. That's how luck is created.
Right.
Luck comes your way. But unfortunately, some people don't recognize when luck is staring them in the face.
Right.
So those of you who are here, there are some amazing people. I mean, that panel that you were sitting on streetwear, that was an amazing panel. So if they're outside, you owe it to yourself to go shake their hand and meet them, because this is a wonderful opportunity here.
Yeah, a lot of times people say like, oh, you're just lucky, like you just got to wear it because of luck. Like,
come to my office at 3 a.m. and see why I'm
right,
lucky.
see why I'm lucky.
Yeah.
If I may ask, how old are you now?
I'm not going to tell you that, Jeff. You never told me.
Okay, well, whatever age you are.
It's very superstitious for Chinese.
I know.
It's very. That's the.
Okay.
It's like wearing white.
So you're 30. So you're 31.
Again.
Okay, so imagine you're talking to John Jay, 18-year-old John Jay.
Mm-hmm.
You have the ability, you have all the knowledge that you've gained, and now you're talking to your 18-year-old self.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you want to give him?
God, I don't know. So, to be honest, there was not a lot. I do look back and at school, and quite honestly, and wish I would have, worked harder there. I kind of took this sick pride that I got good grades without, got B's without working that hard. And I would always think, well, sure, I could have gotten an A too if I would have just busted my ass. And something really happened when I went to New York. I found out, okay, show, rehearsal's over. This is the real thing. And so I don't know. My advice is just work hard.
Right.
I just don't know any other way. I think, quite honestly, there's a lot of people more talented than me. There's people who are smarter than me, people who are better connected than me. The only way I know how to survive is just to work hard. And I guess that comes from my immigrant, blood.
Yeah. But all the paths that you took, you don't regret any of them.
No, because you never know. You just there's no wrong path. You just take it, be decisive. You can't wallow around and worry about, just take one, do the hell of a job at that one, and that'll spring into a fork in the road and give you more opportunities.
Right. A lot of the times when I teach classes at NYU and at Parsons, and a lot of the times the students ask me, how do you know when something is done? Like, you're working on something, when do you know when to stop? Because if you could sit there and tweak all day and move this to the left and move this up, move this down, like, when is it done? And I feel like you have that sort of confidence where, just like in the commercials you saw, they're so simple, but it was done. And when do you know? How do you know when it's time to put the brush down?
Well, sometimes you don't have the luxury of wondering when. It's like the clock is ticking,
Yeah,
and it's done. The deadline is there, and it's that someone else is whispering in your ear that it's done.
Right.
But I do think we have a reputation. Some of the most successful people at the agency can create a bit of friction in the company because they just won't let it go out the door. One more chance, one more time. I'm having this.
I hate those
issues. No, I mean in creative people inside the agency.
Oh, okay.
I'm having this problem right now in China. The creative director is what happened here? Oh, it should have been something sexy or something at least.
Oh, they turned off all the lights.
Hello.
It's that mystery girl you've been wanting to be.
Okay.
So what was the question? I don't remember the question.
No, you answered it.
Okay, good.
I think many would agree, including myself, that you're at the top of your game now. So who do you now admire and who do you look up to? I mean, you're at the top, so who do you sort of look up to?
Well, one thing, I don't disagree with you very often, Jeff, but I would disagree with that. I think in many ways, I think I'm just getting started. I'm just shifting into third gear, quite frankly. The more I'm experiencing, I know very little about India. I admire India a great deal. So there's no way I can say that chapter of my life has been fulfilled and I know everything that I need to know. So keep putting that. It's that famous line at Nike. There's no finish line.
Finish line, yeah.
That's how I see life.
And then what's left then? What else do you want to accomplish?
Gosh, there's so much. I think Studio J touches upon that a little bit. Helping, and this is I shouldn't even talk about it because I'm kind of superstitious. And that is, if I can do something good for the local Chinese community in Portland, if I can be a catalyst, as I am a catalyst with creative people to do something to save that neighborhood, because it's quickly becoming gentrified with hipster stores and so forth.
Right.
And I'd love to have some kind of contribution to save that neighborhood.
That's why you deliberately opened there.
That's why I put Studio J there.
Right.
Yeah.
Earlier when we were talking about the rise, this whole convention is sort of the rise of Asian culture. And we were talking about Far East Asian culture versus Asian American culture.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's two separate things, or is it the same thing? Or
It has been. Of course it's related, but it's been two separate things. And I kind of touched upon it earlier where I thought, the hierarchy, is breaking down. I think the great power of Korea, we didn't even talk about Korea today, and the tremendous culture that's developing there. I think for Asian Americans, I think we need to get up to speed because we may no longer just be automatically the leader in any way.
Right. So do you still love what you do?
I do. Can I show a couple things from visuals as they help you? Because this relates to your last panel, I thought. Can we go to, I'm going to show number 8, 9, and 10, one after another. And show 8, and I'll comment on it. And this is not my work, it's just some observation I just wanted to share with you. So we'll put number 8 first. Not video, still. You want to run it? Just let it run. What is this now? This is the 5-minute. We should. I'll let it play. This is the first Just Do It spot of China that we did.
天，男孩子的名字哦。也有很多人问我为什么去看，我有故事啦。圣经里面被遗
This
弃的
ran
孩
first
子，
on the internet.
所以每个人都应该爱他。
从小我爸就要灌输我听交响乐，但是自从我有自己的思想以后，我不是觉得交响乐不好，是我觉得我爸爸老是硬要我听，他越是要我听，我越是不要听。我现在活在我这一代，我有自己现在影响我的那些摇滚的 pop、R&B、hip hop 都会听，他们骨子里面永远还是透着那些，就是那些很自我欣赏、自我爱怜，自我陶醉的那种感觉。打篮球，在这个场上基本上全都是男生，你能在这个场上看到一个女生，你就会觉得是稀有动物一样。他们只要把手一伸，完全就可以成。没办法，人太矮了，手太小。不要紧，我会用自己来证明给他们看。外国人他们打那个街球嘛，真的很多。什么事情如果有什么纷争，他们可以用街球来解决。转身的时候感觉很帅，这样的转身，现在的成功率比以前高多了。但是我总是还是在练。 我年轻时候那个时候很喜欢 hip hop， 但是那个时候我周围没有这个圈子玩 hip hop，hip hop 的文化在上海，在中国根本就还没有成型，是婴儿中的婴儿，而且跳舞的时候流汗的是真的全身都在这种喜欢听的感觉，真的很棒很棒很棒。
有多少问题要去面对，有多少夜痛苦烦恼着你无法入睡。
喵喵，来打个招呼，喵喵。
So let's go. Can we go to the still?
Yeah, can we cut?
都是双面性的，我也有
Get ready for 8, 9, and 10. Sorry, we're just mindful of time.
Yeah.
So there's a series, we did 6 of these, little mini documentaries, finding young people in China who are already expressing, living the life of a just do it spirit. So they didn't need a bunch of smart Westerners coming into China to teach them what just do it meant. This is a country that is just do it in the biggest form. So here, I just wanted to show this. This is a recent Gucci ad that's running in Women's Wear Daily. And for those in the fashion business who think they invented something, don't really understand the cultural references that are connected to this bag. And then you go to the Seattle Museum, go to the next slide, and you see this artist, amazing artist who is being influenced by Native American and Alaska art. But of course you see the cultural references there. And then the next one, then you understand where all of this came from was this, which
It's so obvious when a sneakerhead sees that Gucci ad. It's the first thing that pops into your head is Air Jordan, you know. But from high fashion world, it's innovative.
right.
Yeah.
So
you both mentioned that you grew up in pretty traditional Asian families where arts or creative expression wasn't really encouraged. It was more about getting a professional job and going on from there, which I can relate to. But now when you look at art schools, Parsons and Fly Art, you see Asians almost heavily over-indexed. And that kind of happened even within a generation. So what do you think personally drove that kind of change in course where, you know, maybe 20 years ago you didn't see a lot of Asian Americans, even as a percentage of the population, in art school, and now they're kind of a dominant presence?
I'll let Jeff answer. He teaches at all these schools, so what do you think? You kick him out, or?
I made fun of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it could be just certain key players that are really breaking the mold right now. Sort of like the ones we were seeing before, like Hiroshi Fujiwara and Migo and Takashi Murakami, you know, and even to a point, people who are not in the art field, you know what I mean, like sort of the Chow Yun-Fats of the world. I think that is just giving us Asians sort of more confidence to be able to say, I don't have to be the accountant, I don't have to be the lawyer, I can do what I want to do, you know. So I think maybe that helps it a lot too.
Jeff, I was wondering, you asked John what his greatest failure was. What was yours?
My greatest failure came very early on, where, and this is the strange thing about this world, is Bobito, who he hired to do that first commercial, he had a store in the East Village of New York called Bobito's Footwork. And it was a very legendary store. Bobito is a very legendary hip-hop personality. And I brought my first staple catalog to him to try to get him to buy the shirts. And I showed him the catalog. I was waiting for him for like 2 hours to come. It's 2 hours late for a meeting, you know, with me. Showed him the catalog and he's like, no, I'm not really feeling any of this shit. And like, I literally walked out of there like a tear rolled down my eye. Cause like my idol like just shitted on my whole entire creation. So I could have stopped there and been like, you know what, this isn't my thing, and you know, I'm not meant to be, you know, this isn't it. Or I did what I did, which was come back with another collection, show it to him, and then he finally picked it up, you know.
Oh, right there.
John, forgive me if I get the number wrong, but the WK12 program that you guys did,
Oh yeah.
the young art, could you talk about that for a little bit and the inspiration?
Sure. I think we're in our 4th year, 5th year, I can't remember, 4th year. WK12 is a school. We're the only licensed creative school inside an agency in Oregon. And we have, I don't know, 1,000 entries, applicants for 12 slots for the school. It is not an internship. It is $1,000, it's $12,000 per student. So you have to pay. So one of the things we want to separate are those people we want people who are super serious about coming to this school. And you spend one whole year, and it's a very, very creative, selective process that we go through. And the one thing that we make very clear that there is no guarantee or promise of a job at the agency upon graduation. But you do get to work inside our culture, very unique culture, and get to know the personalities and see how things work. And then they also go out and get their own small clients, pro bono clients, and so forth. And the first year, despite what we said that we would not, well, we did say we wouldn't hire anyone. We said there's no guarantee of any job. Do not expect a job after this. We ended up hiring 8 out of 12 the first year, 2 of which are now my copywriter and art director team in Tokyo. So it's a very eclectic group. I mean, really eclectic. This last group we have a gentleman who finished his Harvard MBA while at 12. I mean, imagine, this is, and then we have a baker, we have a construction guy, we have, rappers, and some classic advertising people as well.
Yes.
Just play devil's advocate for a second. I know that you spoke sort of briefly about some of the Nike business you guys got on seat on recently. I know what the Trade Pub said about why not being digital enough or lacking digital, etc. What do you think about it? Do you think it was?
I think that was a wound that was self-inflicted. That it's partly true, and partly, and in a great deal not true. But a little bit of cultural kind of background. We in Portland, interesting enough, are just beginning. We just hired last year our first PR person. We pride ourselves on never talking about ourselves and never talking about our successes and so forth. So we were doing a lot of digital work for other clients. But somehow the snowball just kept rolling down the hill. On the other side, we were probably not up to speed as where we should be, and we're clearly in a 2-minute hurry-up offense right now. And we've got some tremendous talent in-house in the last 8 months already, and clearly this is being rolled out around the country. So we're fast learners.
Sort of second part of that question is, Nike's been a client for the 25 years. Why do you think it's fair that you have another 25 years with them?
Is it fair?
Yeah, I mean, Leo Burnett's going to go on their 80th year with McDonald's, and
right.
You're sort of like.
It's only fair if we live up to the promise, if we keep doing great work and understand. I think you have to deliver. You have to deliver, and the competition is harder and harder. I think in your presentation you talk about how marketing, the matrix, the mix is a lot more complex today, and many of the traditional agencies are kind of only know one song, and there's a great deal of truth in that. But the great thing about us is that we're independent. We're not part of a holding company. I don't have Wall Street to answer to. I don't have a board of directors. There's only 5 partners. I'm one of the partners. So we kind of march to our own tune, and we'll figure things out.
I think it's also like Nike has changed a lot too.
Oh.
And there's two types of companies in this world, and you can see the great divide between the two. One is a product-driven company, meaning they stand behind the products that they make. The other is a market-driven company, which means they ride with the trends and they go along with whatever's cool, and they follow it that way. They don't stand behind the product; they stand behind their PR and marketing team. And I think Nike 25 years ago, when they started with these shoes that I'm wearing, was a product-driven company. And over the years, they've sort of evolved for better or for worse into a marketing-driven company. And I think Wyden was so good at promoting Nike as a product-driven company, but then now with the change of Nike, that's where sort of the rift is happening, I think. That's the way I see it as an outsider. So, yes.
John, I grew up down the road from you. I'm from Cincinnati, so a Bearcat, you're a Buckeye. So I know kind of,
You killed us in 60 and 61.
Well, that's the last time they had winning teams. The question I have is sort of a social question. It's been mentioned a couple times today as far as we have to catch up here with what's going on, in Asia. And then you also made the statement that there have been great social and economic changes, of course, like the merging and after the war in one situation. And of course they replaced Europe, which came off great catastrophe of the Second World War. We've never really experienced that here in the United States, and I kind of have it hard to envision that we would ever become equal or even a leader. It would seem as if everything has to be devastated, and you would start from the very beginning. It would seem that maybe, and it's really hard to visualize, the Middle East might be the next big area. And as people have said, and it's not widely known, a lot of money is going over there now for the fact of when everything does in the next 10, 15, 20 years becomes normalized, that will be the next area.
You
comment on
you must have been a fly on our conversation last night.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we were talking about where is, we were talking about out of great sort of struggle and pain comes the greatest creativity. And we were talking about concurrently, why does it feel like there's nothing raw anymore? Why is there no more there's no more push and pull? Where is all that? And John said, it's in the Middle East. So
Islamic culture.
Islamic culture, yeah. So I think you're onto something.
First was the Asian culture.
Right.
Then it goes to which is.
And then there was the Black African American culture, hip hop.
But to speak to, what we do for a living. The reason why there's political angst there, social angst, and it hasn't been commodified.
Right.
Maybe people more higher think alike.
I think we have one more.
Yeah, gentlemen.
Yeah, I hate to be cliche, and I've been to Wyden, and I'm just curious about how do you, I don't want to say justify, but how do you sit with talking about this Asian culture and the sweatshops and the whole, that part of Nike and all that bad publicity that's come about that, and I know that Wyden has a very, positive or trying to make changes socially and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, they obviously were not watching what was going on, and I think they've gotten great, the client, Nike's gotten great kudos in opening up the evaluation of those factories and so forth, so it took a while, and I don't think all things are solved. Obviously, China's a big place, and you can see what's happening with Mattel right now in the food industry and so forth. But they certainly made a big turn in the right direction, and hopefully they'll continue that. But them making the process of evaluation open to journalists and the public, I think was the first big step that they made.
Is that something as an advertiser, you're there talking with all the top people, is that something that you bring up, like, that they need to address that in their advertising?
Yeah, they too have, remember their culture and our culture, we're both Portland born, sure. The DNA is from the Portland water there. And when they did not use the press to offset, to do good, to talk about all the good things. The tremendous amount of things that they do in the area of social mission, almost you don't even hear about it. Unlike Target, which is our client, and the 5% of profit that they give like something, I think it's like $5 million a week. They have a conscious program to talk about that. Nike doesn't. Nike never talks about it. It's just a cultural thing up there. Okay, I think we're at our wits end, if not at our end. Thank you very much.